condemn us for it. And all these things cause us to also shut doors on ourselves. In Luke 24, also the account of the resurrection, but that one is from the Gospel of St. Luke. After they closed themselves in verse 36 it says, now as they said these things, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, peace to you. So in the midst of their fear, in the midst of their terror, in the midst of all these thoughts that they're going through, and when we think about it, like the events, when do you think they start really getting afraid?
When do we start getting afraid?
No, when did they, the disciples? When were they terrified? When do you think they went to the upper room? I'm guessing.
Well, after the resurrection, they were afraid what will happen.
Okay.
Once he left them, they were afraid.
So the crucifixion.
Yeah.
So probably really when he got arrested in Gethsemane, that's when they all started leaving him, and they went to the upper room.
Yeah.
And so they locked themselves up in terror. So from Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, now we're talking about 3.5 days. They're locked in. They don't want to see a human being. They're terrified. They don't know what's going to happen to them in their lives. And all of a sudden the Lord appears in their midst and says, peace to you. And this happens to us too. When we're terrified, when we have all these fears, and we're shutting doors on ourselves, the Lord very often doesn't force the door open. It's kind of like that picture we all see growing up, the Lord on the outside knocking at the door with no knob. He doesn't force the door open. He wants us to open. But then he has visitations of grace. There's these visitations of grace where he comes and says, peace to you. I am with you. Listen to me. If we listen, if we accept this message that he's given us, it could be a message through our scriptural reading. It could be a message as we're standing in church and we feel something in our hearts. It could be a message through a little kid who speaks to us. It could be a message through a priest, a servant, a fellow, a friend, whatever it is. The Lord uses many, many different means to come and say to us, peace to you, I love you, do not fear. And so he says this to them, but they were terrified and frightened, and supposed they had seen a spirit. And he said to them, why are you troubled, and why do doubts arise in your hearts? And this is also something he does with us. In the midst of our fears, he comes, and he kind of comes and says, peace to you. What is it you're so afraid of? Why are you troubled? Am I not with you? Why do you not trust in me? Like two friends who imagine if you get in a silly fight with a friend, like a really, really silly thing over something really petty, like you fight over a pen or something. And then at the end of it, you go home and you're like, we fought over a pen? This is so stupid, like foolish. and so he's recording.
It's live.
So it's very foolish, right? Like we fought over a pen. What is this? But then you think to yourself, and you're like, it's not worth it. So I go to my friend, and I tell him, like, why are you so upset? Why are you upset? Are you going to be upset over a pen? And you tap the person on the back, and you're like, Khalas, it's over, and you move on. This is kind of what the Lord's doing. He comes and says, why are you troubled? He's patting us on the back, saying, why are you troubled? What's bothering you so much? Was it because you think, and he's like, we're imagining here. He comes to his disciple and he says, why are you troubled? And they say, well, you died. And he's like, well, I'm right here. Didn't the Marys come and say to you that I rose from the dead? And they're like, yes. Didn't the two disciples on the road to Emmaus come and testify to you that I rose from the dead? Yes, they did. Didn't I tell you before I died that I would rise from the dead? Yes, you did. Where's the problem? Why are you troubled? And so the Lord gives us many promises ahead of time. And he tells us many things. But if we hold on to his promises, if we recall his promises, then we'll think that way. We'll start thinking, why am I troubled? What's bothering me so much? Why am I not trusting in him? He's not a liar. He's promised me certain things. So what's troubling me? And so I need to learn to trust in him. I need to learn that the issue is going to disappear. Behind those closed doors, so they shut themselves in. What's happening outside? So they go in Thursday night, let's say Friday morning, whatever it is, they shut themselves in. What's happening outside? The Lord gets crucified, and then what?
He's buried.
He's buried, and then what?
3 days. 3 days.
Before the 3 days.
Time goes by. Yeah, just
Before 3 days.
oh.
Bright Saturday, what are we doing? What's happening in the events of Bright Saturday?
The dead are rising from the grave.
He descends into Hades, right? And so we can picture, while they're sad and frightened and fearful, the joy of salvation is being proclaimed to all those who have been awaiting him all these centuries and years and so on. From Adam until John the Baptist, right? Everybody that's been awaiting him, they see Christ appear. They've been waiting for him. The joy that they get. And so, behind the closed doors that they shut on themselves, that prevented them from seeing what's truly going on behind the scenes, was joy. Things being prepared for the salvation of mankind and for my own salvation personally. And so, while I fear certain things, while I'm ashamed of maybe exposing my sins to the Lord, or for people to see my weaknesses, or whatever it may be, behind all this, behind the doors I shut on myself, there is good news. The Lord loves me. The Lord wants me. The Lord says, I did not come for those who have no sin. I came for you. I came for you because you need me. I came to proclaim the joy of salvation to you. Salvation meaning you are saved. And so he's coming to give me this good news, but I'm shutting the door. If I let him tell me this good news, if I let him come and say peace to you like he did here, then I begin to receive the message, and I begin to also be joyful as the disciples were. The disciples were transformed by these words, by his appearance in their lives there in the upper room. What happened after the resurrection for them is a transformation. The people who were terrified were the same people, those disciples who were terrified are the same people who did what? They went out and proclaimed the good news to everybody. They preached to the nations as the Lord commanded them. They went, and even when the Jews and the rulers were telling them, be silent, they said, how can we be silent? Right? In Acts chapter 4, they were saying, how can we be silent? You can tell us to be silent. We're not going to be silent. That's the courage they received. There's a transformation. When I let the Lord into my heart, when I let him proclaim the joy of salvation, then there's a transformation in my life. The fears that I have become transformed into courage. The lack of forgiveness that I feel towards my own sins turns into an acceptance of the forgiveness of the Lord, and so on. And so we need to let the Lord in. And one of the things that blocks us, sometimes the doors, we shut the doors on ourselves, but sometimes the sins that we have become kind of like, so the first thing we read was the story of the women, what Chris read for us in Mark 16. The women are going to the tomb early in the morning. They bought what before heading to the tombs? Spices. So they bought spices and headed to the tomb early morning, right? What did they say to them amongst themselves? What does it say? Do you remember what it said? Who will roll away the stone for us? Is that odd to any of you? Because to me it is. They buy spices. They head out early in the morning. So picture this, early in the morning, there's nobody outside. And they bought the spices and they're heading there. And they say amongst themselves, who will roll away the stone for us?
You would think it was the other way around.
Like, yeah,
let's see if we can get the stone.
Yeah,
first.
let's move the stone first, then we'll buy the spices.
Right.
Or, if the stone rolls away and somebody comes and tells us the stone's off, we'll buy spices and head out. But why tire myself? That's the attitude, maybe.
Bad plan.
Yeah, like some of us have maybe let things roll and then I'll come, But they headed out. Who will roll away the stone? We don't know. But there's something deep down inside, a certain amount of faith inside that gives them the courage and the push to buy the spices and to head out early. What's going to happen, they don't know. But they do their part. And that's what's required of us. Sometimes we think,
so even if the goal is wrong?
Sorry?
So even if the goal is wrong, I mean, the spices are for somebody dead. They don't have the faith that they're going to come back and find a resurrected Christ.
But they're doing what's right according to their traditions. And so they're heading out. The point is they're doing what's required, right?
Right.
And so they're heading out and they're doing the little that they can. Who will roll away the stone? Okay. But in my life, so the goal has to be right. You're correct. So in my life, my goal shouldn't be, just silly things. But ultimately, there's a stone on my heart blocking access to the risen Christ, blocking access to me experiencing Him and the joy of His resurrection. This stone needs to be rolled. Who will roll away the stone? And so sometimes we give up. That stone could be a stone of sin. I have a habit, a sin that I can't stop, a sin that I can't let go of, or many sins that I can't stop. Or I'm lazy, I don't want to put in the effort to read, to pray, to do these things. Who will roll away that stone for me? And so if I look at these women, I need to follow their example. Do the little I can. Offer the little I can offer. So if I lack patience, offer the little patience I have and say, Lord, you complete. Lord, here's the little I'm able to offer. I know I'm an angry person and I lose my patience all the time. Here's the little I'm offering you, and you help me. You send, in the Gospel of St. Matthew, the same story says there was a huge earthquake and an angel came and rolled the stone. And so you send, Lord, the angel to roll away the stone. You send that earthquake that'll shake me to roll away that stone. But I'll do my part and you do the rest, Lord. That's why St. Macarius the Great, there's a part in homily 3 or 4, I think homily 3. He says, he's talking about sin. And he's talking about how we often feel like we can't be victorious. And then he says, to fight is yours. To wrestle is yours. To give and receive blows is yours. What does that mean? So I fight is my part. To wrestle, back 20 years or so ago, I used to watch wrestling. You watch them wrestling. They flip each other all over the place, right? They jump and to give and receive blows, right? What does that mean? I'll give a blow, but I'll also get hit. I may even fall when I get hit. But I get up and give other blows. And then he says, to uproot sin is the Lord's. And so I do my part. I give and receive. I fight. I wrestle. But victory is from Him. The uprooting of sin is from Him. The rolling away of the stone is from Him. But I need to do my part. And this is what they did. They did their part. And so when we do our part, when we put in the effort, the little struggle that we're able to offer, and we say, Lord, complete, things change in our lives. We begin to experience the risen Christ as they did. We may not recognize Him right away in our lives. Like they didn't recognize Him right away. There were steps. But the process begins. And so it's important for us to begin. It's important for us to try. One of the effects, one of the results of those closed doors in our lives sometimes is when we're left all alone, when we're left feeling like the doors are shut, even if we shut them, or if other doors, generally speaking, in our lives are shut. One of the effects, on us, is that it crushes pride. Again, when you think of the apostles in the upper room, they were relying on their way of thinking all these years. Even though they spent 3 years with Christ, you see them always going back to their way of thinking. Lord, can we sit next to you in the kingdom? We cast out demons. They're thinking with their own way of thinking. But when this happens, their ego is crushed. Their pride is crushed. And when the Lord appears, now they no longer rely on themselves, but on Christ Himself. It's no longer me, but you, Lord Christ. And so in these moments, it's an opportunity for us to turn from looking at ourselves, to step out of ourselves, and to turn to Him, to rely on Him. And when we do this, it teaches us prayer. It teaches us to truly pray. How often, if we pray the 12th hour, which I'm sure we all do every day, so if we pray the 12th hour, right, what's the first psalm in the 12th hour? Number 129, and then what does it say? Out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. This is how it starts. Out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. Probably if we pray the 12th hour and we're praying out of the depths, we're either yawning or we're getting ready to like lie down on the bed, and we're saying out of the depths. It's not out of the depths hugs. Like it's like, out of duty I'm praying. But when I go through a trial or a difficulty, or the doors are shut like that, right? That's when I begin to experience true prayer. That's when I begin to experience what it means to cry out of the depths. That's when I truly learn to pray. And so it's an opportunity for us to connect to the Lord. I remember a long time ago, maybe 11, 12 years, I can't remember, but like a good number of years ago, I was going through something, and I called a spiritual father, and I told him, Abuna, this and this going on. And his answer shocked me. He goes, good. I was like, what do you mean good? That's not the advice I want. That's not the response I want. And he's like, good, because this will teach you prayer. This will teach you to turn to the Lord. This will teach you to cry out to Him. And so those moments where the doors are shut in our faces, those moments where even we shut the doors on ourselves, are moments where we need to take that opportunity to connect with Him, to turn to Him, to cry out of the depths truly, and to learn to have that relationship with Him. When we do that, we begin to experience, despite the trials you may be going through, we begin to experience a sense of everything's okay. A sense of, I'm not worried because I have Him. I trust in Him. He's capable of doing whatever it is that's needed for my good. And so I have nothing to worry about. But it takes sometimes it takes those shut doors in our faces that cause us to get on our knees and to cry out to Him. Speaking of getting on our knees, it reminded me a number of years ago, I wrote this in one of my Bibles because I was traveling, and my friend told me a saying that really touched me. It was actually in 2005, I remember. The saying goes, the shortest distance between a problem and a solution is the distance between your knees and the ground. He who bows to the Lord can stand up to anything. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very powerful, it's true. When we get on our knees, when we cry out to Him, when we lift our hands to Him, when we ask Him to help us, and more importantly, like I said in the sermon, it's not just about getting the answer that we're expecting, but more about connecting with Him and finding joy in His presence. Then there could be fire around us, but we will be comforted. When we think about the three holy youth, they were in the furnace. How easy would it have been for God to shut off the fire? Very easy. He's the creator of all. He's able to do any miracle. But what did He do? He didn't shut off the fire. What did He do?
He went with them.
He appeared in their midst and He was with them. Right? He was in their midst. And they were joyful and praising. Right? So the fire was there, but they were with Him. And so they were able to praise. And so even when there's trials around us, if we have Him with us, we're able to praise Him. We're able to be joyful in His presence. And that actually transformed the king, right? King Nebuchadnezzar, after that, proclaimed, we need to worship the God of these three holy youth, right? And so it has a transformative effect on us, but also on others around us without even realizing it. And so, the shut doors, like I said, sometimes we shut the doors out of fear. But when the Lord comes and proclaims peace to you, we need to receive that peace. We need to accept the message He's giving us. And like the women carrying the spices early in the morning with the stone there, we always ask, how am I going to overcome? Who will roll away the stone of sin from my heart that I may experience the risen Christ? Well, if I do the little struggle and offer that to the Lord, the little I can offer Him can transform me as well, and the Lord can complete the work that we do. May God grant us the courage to do so, and glory be to our God. Questions, thoughts, floor is yours.
So I think what you said about at least taking the small steps of what we can do, because sometimes we think with the let me look at the whole picture. No, that's not going to work. And we go with our own logic, like you said. But sometimes if we just take a small step, there's opportunities that God presents or that provides that we didn't expect to see, that opens doors that we would have never seen if we did not take that first step. So even as simple as prayer is, like even just reading the one verse could change my whole perspective on a problem that I'm struggling with or something.
I think one of the things that really resonated in the story was, we always think of ourselves being human. We're weak.
Yeah.
But even though the apostles and his disciples spent a lot of time with him, they also showed weakness as well, and they had to resort to prayer, and they lost faith as well, and they had to come back the same way we're asked to be able to seek his guidance and his wisdom through prayer.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
I think for me, my favorite takeaway from what you said is the solution is there. Right? Like Jesus had spent time telling them, I'm going to resurrect, and he sent the messages and he appeared to them. And as you were talking, it reminded me of the story of Elijah and Elisha when they were on the mountain and the army was surrounding them. And Elijah was completely calm and he was fine. And he was freaking out. And then he prayed so that God would open his eyes and he saw the army of the Lord surrounding. That's kind of the same thing, but we can't see that army. And so it doesn't give us that inner peace to know that, whatever. I mean, things around us can happen. It doesn't matter. God's army is still around us.
If the Lord is with us,
Then who's against us?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned kind of the when you're at the trials and challenges, out of the depths is the opportunity to kind of connect with Jesus. Personally, that's actually when I find it easiest to do that. I find it more challenging when I'm not, and I guess my question is how do you take just the normal day-to-day when you're feeling okay, when there isn't that kind of emotion that's driving you to kind of connect?
Sorry, let me rephrase it just to make sure I understood you. So you're saying you do feel like in trials you connect, or you don't? You do. But out of trials you feel it grows cold.
Yeah, it's harder for me.
So knowing that, knowing the work or the way the devil works with us, once he sees that, okay, the trial is over and things are good, he attacks us with little distractions and laziness and means of telling us, like, you don't need to stand now, like, you'll do it later. Because the urgency from inside is not there. And so knowing how the devil works is the first thing. Like, we know his war against us. And so knowing how our enemy is going to come and fight us is our first step to fight back. So we give and receive blows, right? And so in order to give the blow properly, I need to know, or to defend myself, I need to know how he's going to hit me. So he's hitting me that way. So now that I know, I'll defend myself. The second thing is we look at the lives of the saint. I think of Saint Anthony the Great. Saint Anthony the Great, there's two things that come to mind. The first one, after he was in the tombs and he was beat half dead, and if you don't know this, like basically he was beat half dead, and then his friend came, took him to the church. He said, "No, take me back." And he was alone there in the cave again, or in the tombs, and he said, "Where are you? Oh, here I am, Anthony. Do whatever you wish to do, if you are capable, O children of Gehenna." And then there was this this bright light, and all the pains he had, he was completely, like, he couldn't walk, he couldn't move. All the pain he had left him. And he got up and he was able to kind of do everything again. So he said to God, "Where were you?" And the Lord says, "I was here all along, watching your struggle, and because you have been faithful, I will be your comforter and something else, I forgot. And your guide. And I will make your name to be renowned throughout the ages." And then it says he got up, bowed the knee, gave thanks to God, and worshipped him and prayed. What does that mean? After his tribulation, he got up, worshipped God, gave thanks to him, and prayed. Sometimes in our trials, like you're saying, we go through a trial, please Lord help me, help me, help me, help me, help me. And then we get the help that we needed.
We're
We're
good.
good, we say
We're
thank
good.
you.
See ya.
But he said thank you, he worshipped him, and he prayed. And so that's the first lesson. When we do get out of a trial, we need to thank him. Thankfulness leads us to love more. When I realize somebody's done something great for me, it gives me a spirit of, like I'm grateful, and I want to do something for you. And so it leads to love, and love leads to joy. And so it becomes a cycle. So I need to thank him for the things he's done in my life. I don't need to wait for a trial to start thanking him. I can think of things to thank him now and start. And so that'll protect me from getting cold. And then prayer and worship. The second thing St. Athanasius writes about St. Anthony, he says, when basically the times were good, when he wasn't going through a trial, he would double his efforts. So we think the opposite, right? Like when he's in a trial, he'd double his efforts, he wants to get out of it. Because he was in good health, and he wasn't attacked physically, and there was nothing going on, he was able to do more. And so he would double his efforts when things were peaceful. So that when things were tough, he has that to, fall back on. And so we too in our lives, when things are good, let's not wait. Sometimes we have time off, and we have free time, and we say, I'll read later, I'll pray later, I'll do this later. And then when we're in school or at work and we're so busy, we're like, I wish I had some time to read. If only I had a few minutes to read, I would read. But then God gives us the time very often, and we do nothing with it.
Yeah.
And so why not be like St. Anthony when we do have the time to truly use it wisely, to truly put in the effort, to store up. And so it just takes a bit of like a change of attitude and a change of perspective, realizing what the devil's doing in order for us to fight back. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Abuna.
Thank you, Abuna. That's very good.
Really nice.